Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome back to the Liberated Sensitive. This is, I believe, my fourth show. Normally my assistant joins me for Dubois, but today she's feeling very much under the weather. So you get just me. Call in if you like, if you have questions, or you just feel like you want to share something. I'm always very open to that. And before I get started, I wanted to let you all know that if you would like to follow this show, you can either subscribe here on Blog Talk, or you can actually go to my YouTube channel where I am posting up all of the shows, and you can see what I look like in person, because I'm also doing videos with me at The Liberated Sensitive. Again, the same name, The Liberated Sensitive. But before I get started today, maybe I should define out a little bit about, who I am and how I came to start coaching sensitive people, or highly sensitive people, rather, in particular. I know I've said on previous shows that I am a highly sensitive person. That's very true. And it took me years to figure out that that was what was really going on through many, 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 many trials and tribulations. I started out as a child as an introvert, very, very introverted. I normally had one or two friends. I could feel what was going on with the other children, with my family, etc. I was highly, highly intuitive. I would discuss this with my mother. A lot of my verbal and mental understanding around this was, somewhat religious, because a lot of times when people can't figure out what's going on, they will turn to religion. That's how my mother understood it. So she understood it as, God was speaking through me and things like that. So I was fortunate that she was open to my intuition. And I was also a very, very highly gifted intellectual child. So what I did was I spent a lot of times in libraries and a lot of time reading. I read psychology, when it pertains to this anyway. I read science fiction a lot. I read a lot of fantasy books as well. And I wrote. I just kept writing. In my reality, I was trying to figure out, why people were angry, why people were so competitive, because inside of myself, I just wanted love, and I wanted everyone to love each other, and there was this aspect of me that felt that, I could help people to do that. So no big surprise that I eventually... So I practiced as a psychic. I joined the military because I was attempting to be like other people. I was attempting to be, quote unquote, normal, whatever that is. And, and I learned a lot there, a whole lot, actually. And then when I came out, I was suffering from a great deal of depression and anxiety and all sorts of things. And I went to therapists. Their answer was largely to put me on medication, which I would have been willing to do, but I didn't feel like they were spending enough time with me to really listen to what it was that I was saying. And I didn't feel like their diagnosis was quite accurate. So it was during that time that I met my first spiritual teacher. And long story short, I joined an ashram. And I found a lot of useful tools there. I learned to love unconditionally. I learned to, what meditation really was. I had been meditating from the time I was a small child. So, yes, I guess you could say I'm a natural meditator. Many sensitive people are natural meditators. We tend to be in tune with what is our core self more highly than other people. But oftentimes we're trying to be like other people who are not highly sensitive people, to fit in, because this is what we're being advised to do most often. What eventually ended up happening is that I left the ashram because through meditation and so forth, it became obvious that I needed to be in the world to do what it is that I was meant to do, which is to help a lot of people. Again, I learned to love unconditionally. I learned to love other people unconditionally. I was very good at loving other people unconditionally. I still am. But what I didn't learn was how to love myself unconditionally. And there was a lot of spiritual dogma around me. I was using protection, yet I would go through bouts of depression. I would go through bouts of, just really feeling out of it. I was always very, very concerned about who I had around me. I went through, a lot of sort of crazy things. During that time, I became self-employed, and in my self-employment, I was very much helping people in various ways. I did massage therapy, I did energy healing, and many other things. So I learned as I was going along. And then everything sort of came crumbling down. Oh, I also went to school during this time, and I studied what I call human behavior on steroids, anthropology, with an emphasis in archaeology. And for those that don't know, archaeology is the study of human behavior of the past. Anthropology is the study of all human behavior, past and present, in all cultures, in as many ways as we can possibly understand it. So, yes, it is study of human behavior on steroids. So I earned my degree. I also earned a degree in history, in art history, to be specific. I also studied design because, yes, like many sensitives, I'm a very, very creative person. And all of that led me into my brain, into intellectualizing just about everything. And I could no longer feel my heart. And I got sick. Some people may not believe this. I run across it quite often. But the truth is that I am very sensitive to gluten. And so organs started shutting down. My body was shutting down. I was in line to get into a PhD program, which I was selected for. But I didn't know what was going on. And I spent probably 6 months literally, physically almost dying until I figured out what the problem was. And, thank goodness. Thank goodness for the internet. Thank goodness for lots of research and my own intuition. But meanwhile, I lost just about everything. And so this sent me into another spin. I was in a relationship, or I got into a relationship that was probably the most challenging relationship of my lifetime. And that really sent me on an inner journey. An inner journey that was pretty much unstoppable. It was through that, and I started another business where I was, doing intuitive counseling and spiritual life coaching. But I felt like it was really missing something. And the people that I had been attracting were highly sensitive people. Now, I hadn't heard this term really, highly sensitive person. In spiritual community, I certainly heard sensitive person. I've heard, you're a guru, you're special, all of those sorts of things. But I actually heard it through meditation, and I started doing some research, and I figured out, that's what I am, is a highly sensitive person. And then I started doing more and more research. And as I was helping people in my coaching, I decided, no, since I'm a highly sensitive person, and I have learned to really, really thrive, and I have learned to help others to really, really thrive, which is even, most important in what I'm doing. And I've helped them to be free. Perhaps I should just concentrate on that, at least for now. So as Dr. Aaron says, 20% of the people on the planet are highly sensitive people, which is about 1.4 billion people. So, highly sensitive people really, really do need coaching. Therapists are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Okay. And, like everybody, there's some really great ones. And there's some that are, psychology, what is mainly taught is to allow people to cope. The goal of a therapist is not to make a person happy, or to not make that, but is not to guide a person to be happy. It's to guide a person to function and cope in the world. Hopefully, through that functioning, you get some happiness. For a coach, the difference is that we sort of pick up where the therapist leaves off, and we help people to actually become very happy and to get what it is that they want in life. And what different people want is going to be different. So, sort of in a nutshell, a little bit of my background story. Today I am free. I don't experience anxiety. I don't experience depression. I haven't in about 3 years now. I believe, time's a continuum, and I have this interesting relationship to time. But yes, and I have several other people that I work with who are very much doing the same thing, that they're not experiencing. And if they're experiencing these things, it's on a different level, and they're always moving forward, and, they're able to release quickly. Because these things take practice, and then the tools that I give take practice, and then you actually get to a space of where this just becomes a part of who you are. It becomes like breathing. And I'm not the only person that I know that's been able to accomplish these things. And it's interesting because we're pretty much all in agreement on more or less how to accomplish this, and also, with our perceptions of what's going on. So today's show, the subject that I picked out was dealing with your inner children. There is more than one inner child, okay, if you will, or you could say aspects And I've never attempted to publicly explain this before, although I've explained it quite readily to my clients that come see me. So bear with me. Hopefully, I'm quite sure I'm capable of explaining this, but hopefully this will come across in a way that is, simplified and understanding to you. So I often see people who talk about their inner child, and what they're really referring to is the aspects of their subconscious that are more or less in their way. And I was taught at one point in my reality to parent my inner child. That was not unhelpful. It allowed me to cope. But at the same time, my subconscious would still, come up, and it would, experience things, experience emotions, because it was always determining how I was really feeling. So it was in connection with my other inner child, or our other inner child, which is essentially the core being, if you will. Some people call it spirit. Some people call it higher self. I don't like the term higher self for many reasons, but that would be a whole different riff. It is your core being, okay? And that core being is very wise in many, many ways, but it doesn't really understand a lot of things that the body is experiencing, and so it combobulated in. It's trying to expand. That's its main purpose. And it also, has a purpose that ties into, the earth and the inhabitants on the earth and why it decided to incarnate here. Yes, this all sounds very spiritual. I know. But it's true. And science has actually, been able to figure out that there are energies, okay, that, and you can go look this up, but science has found that there are energies that are, superseding things in the body that are a big part of who we are. And the science is trying to figure out how, the interactions are, what the interactions are with it in the environment, it and our biology, and so on and so forth. So when I talk about these things, I'm not, just talking about it as a form of some belief. Okay, it's also because I've done a lot of work, and I tend towards, not believing in the dogma. And again, to be free is to be self-empowered, not just self-loving, but also self-empowered. So to be self-empowered means that, while we definitely take input in and we take in consideration people's opinions and things that they say, we question it and we sit with it, okay? And that's what I do. But, sorry about the sidetrack. So that's the inner child. So when we look at the core being in a baby, it's one of the things that we often feel is just so adorable about a baby, whether they're our baby or not, because they are resonating from that space. They don't have a lot of input yet about what's going on with Earth. And psychology has determined that there's this thing called the critical factor, which I learned about in Psychology 101. So the critical factor comes in by the time we're about 5 or 6 years old. There's a little fluctuation there depending upon the particular person. So this comes in when we're 5 or 6 years old, and everything that we've learned until we're 5 or 6 years old, is just, we're like sponges. That our brain takes it in as, that's factual reality. And it's stubborn. And it's what the subconscious uses to determine whether or not something's true or false. It et cetera. It's usually true or false. It is what the subconscious uses, the tools that it uses to cope. Okay? And it doesn't matter whether or not you have been in, an abusive family, a highly abusive family or not. That you use to cope and your subconscious is still always using on a non-conscious level in order, to survive, as it will, or as it were. But oftentimes what happens is what was useful to your surviving within your family of origin, in, your school days, etc., when you were a child is no longer useful. It's in your way of actually expanding. And so we start to, consciously understand a lot of things, and that's what brings me to this positive thinking sort of genre. I used to do it. It's not that, again, it's completely unhelpful. It teaches us a lot, but it also teaches us that certain things are positive and certain things are negative, and, it causes us to be highly judgmental of the self. And then, again, the subconscious kicks in, and it starts trying to use a lot of the tools that we've used in the past, particularly when we come up against a situation that's causing us a great deal of stress and strife and, challenges. And so then, again, what happens is we eventually will go back into a space of some kind of depressions and anxieties and different things like that. And, yes, we can use meditation, and that helps that, okay? But it's like being on a hamster wheel, and you're still suffering. You're not free in that situation. Not at all. During the time when, I was learning about unconditional love, when I was being in positive thinking mode and, all of that sort of thing, I thought I really loved myself. I really did. I certainly liked myself. I didn't think I was a horrible person, but my subconscious was always playing things in the background. And, yeah, when I would, come across, very, very trying situations, I would feel like a horrible person. And that somehow, in my reality, was supposed to, I guess, put me in a situation to, make me strive forward. Because my core being also learned that to suffer was to actually mean to expand. Well, it is one way of expanding, but it's very limiting way of expanding. So when I had come to a space of suffering enough, really, really deeply suffering, and started to realize on some level that was no longer working for me, I started to look for other tools. And I found some wonderful, wonderful tools. And I started to learn subtlety, to actually learn that my subconscious was cluttered with all of this muck. And I started to develop tools that are based off of the tools that I learned from other people, from watching videos there's just such a plethora of people that I looked into, watching their videos, reading their books, etc., I started to learn to go to my core and how to effectively do that. And I started to learn how to actually teach my core self what was really going on, how I didn't need to suffer, okay? Because that's part of my inner child, right? Like I was explaining, it's inner children. And my core self, or our core self, is actually communicating with our subconscious. And it says, oh, look, this is what's going on. And then the subconscious also is communicating, on the other end to the core self and saying to the core self, okay, well, you're feeling this feeling, so that's anger. And you're feeling this feeling, and that's bad, right? And our conscious mind is also doing that when we're doing positive thinking. Okay, well, you're not allowed to feel that. And so I really had to embrace that all of my feelings, which are different from my emotions, because emotions are a result of feelings that the subconscious create. But I started to learn that all of my feelings were valid, and in all actuality, they could not be defined verbally or by my brain. They just were. Okay. And that I could resonate with those feelings. Okay. To determine whether or not they were useful, whether or not, they were something that could get me to, the things that I wanted. So, yes, there's no negative and positive, but there are things that we want or things that we don't want. And when I say there's no negative and positive, here's why I say that. Because what somebody else wants to feel good to them, if you will, to feel, could be something that they're in alignment with, that they want to be with, and that could feel like something that you don't want. And that's okay, because if it's something you don't want, then don't be in alignment with it, right? But somebody else being in alignment with it, okay, is also okay. They need to be in alignment with that something. Because you don't want it doesn't make it negative, right? And sometimes those things can be some form of suffering, okay? That doesn't make it, again, a negative. Because on some level it's serving some sort of purpose for that person, or they wouldn't be in alignment with it, okay? Such is the nature of, so you see, when we understand this actually allows us to really, really unconditionally love not just ourselves, but also other people on a different level, right? So going back to how do we cope with this? Well, we're clearing the clutter. Some people have called this reprogramming. I've gotten away recently in calling it reprogramming because, well, Scientology does what they call reprogramming, which is an entirely different animal. I watched some documentaries on that. It's very interesting, but it's an entirely different animal. And I don't think really all that useful, to tell you the truth. So the thing is that what we're doing is we're decluttering. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into a feeling without, and it's a sort of a meditation, without actually determining what the feeling is. Okay, and our subconscious and even our conscious mind will try to come in and, look at the feeling and say, oh, this is something that I want or something that I don't want, when it's just a feeling. Okay? And when we can really, really resonate with that, what we end up doing is we can then consciously ask the feeling itself to take us to the first time that we felt that way. Now, this is not regression, okay? I want to point that out, because Regression therapy actually happens in the brain. Okay, this is just all going with your feelings. We can learn to communicate through the feelings themselves. When we're in a great deal of anxiety or depression or, some sort of overwhelming feeling or emotion, trying to go into it doesn't work because we're just in way too much pain. There's just way too many things going off all at once. So in that instance, all we can do is really, really sit with the pain and let the pain be what it is. We ask it the question, why are you here? And then we just sit with it. And we listen. And, sometimes we're not even actively listening, but we're sitting with it. And it is speaking to us. Okay? And then we start to learn that pain is actually our friend through that as well. But there are a lot of subtle things that we do throughout the day that are actually, if you would like to call, triggers. They may not seem like it because we're not reacting in a way that we're computing as being an emotional way. And a lot of them, are called judgment, or we call judgment. So if you find yourself judging or blaming and I'm talking about in any way, even things that seem, according to society, to be legitimate, okay? Because those are triggers, and they will take you to spaces of things that, they oftentimes do not equate logically. The feeling does not equate logically with what it is that we're consciously viewing and experiencing in that moment. That's the thing. That's how we know we're not doing it. If you go into the feeling and it logically equates to you, like really, really seriously logically, it is most likely that you're not actually going into the feeling and that you're still in your brain. Because the brain will try to find logical things, and the brain will even make up memories, okay? Because it's trying to keep us from these feelings because it's determined that these feelings are not acceptable. And it's, in fear. Our core self does not experience fear. It does not experience suffering. It does not experience fear. Okay? So the brain becomes in charge of, okay, this is how we function. But in all actuality, the brain is only meant to be a processing. The processing has simply gotten off. And so we do things like protection because, this feeling is not acceptable to be around. Or we do things like, I'm just going to, go to my heart and be positive. Because again, we're trying to avoid certain feelings, especially core childlike inner child really knows many, many things. Okay? It doesn't know everything, but it knows many, many. It knows who you are. It knows your authentic being. It knows why you came here. It will constantly be aligning you, and you are aligning with everything. You are putting yourself in situations trying to bring that forward, trying to go along the road that you came here to go along. Okay? And the brain will create fear until it gets decluttered. Because if we do the decluttering correctly, what happens is when we go to the child and we validate the child, and I know this is getting a little bit confusing. I'm explaining things as I'm telling you how to do this. But when we go to the child and we validate the child, and what I mean by validate is you just look at the child and you say, and you mean it, I love you no matter what. This feeling's okay. You can have it. You know, all of your feelings are absolutely valid and worthy of your love and to be loved by yourself and others. Or something along those lines, whatever resonates with you. When you come to your inner child and say, oh my gosh, something's wrong, I'm going to save you, that's invalidating because it's saying to the core being, the inner child, that it's not valid. That there's something wrong with the feeling. And there's really nothing wrong with the feeling. It's just learning and consciously coming to the child and saying and having an empowering conversation that will help the core being to understand that the feeling is fine and how that feeling or all of the feelings or whatever the experience, where this experience came from in the first place is fine. And it, it can be empowered enough to really, really, really be okay. And that it does need to be in charge, ultimately. Okay? Ultimately, with playing nice along with the brain, with playing nice along with, the other aspects of the self and, other people that we're actually with. And one of the key things that it needs to understand is me first. Love the self first. Always the self first, no matter what. Never do anything that we don't want to do. Okay? And what I mean by want is, yes, there are going to be things that, in your brain it seems, I really don't want to do that. But, here's the way that things are set up. So I have to do that to get what it is that I really want. So in essence, you really do want to do those things because whatever those things are that are, I would say, like in your way, if you will, to get what you want, you need to do. Might be an education. I see a lot of people say, oh, well, the core self knows everything, so therefore I don't need an education. Well, you do, because the core self, hasn't been here in this body, in this time frame, and et cetera, and doesn't really, necessarily know the tangible things that we need to know in order to do what it is that we need to do. So, you may feel like you don't want to go to school. And maybe you've had some interesting experiences, but, that whole idea of not wanting to go to school when you know that you need to go to school, degrees and whatnot, in order to get what you want, to be able to do what you want to do more easily, is a trigger. Okay? That in and of itself is its own trigger. So it's a form of resistance. So that's another thing. Anytime that we can make out, oh, look, I'm resisting something, that's a trigger, and there's a feeling behind it. And those are the feelings that you can go into. Right? So once we have the empowering conversation, and we will know what it is because we're speaking with ourselves. Once we have the empowering conversation, we'll know when at least those aspects of the core self have been empowered. We'll feel it. We feel a release. And I mean, I've had things like in the past where I've, felt this like sort of expanding sensation in my brain. My heart feels alive. I feel free. I feel like I have wings. But I'm actually decluttered. So now I'm actually working on other aspects of things. I'm free. And the people that I'm working with, or that I have worked with especially, who have moved forward, who no longer need my help in these ways, are just free to actually do what it is that they want. Mean that we don't have challenges. We have challenges. It's just that our attitude is we can surmount any challenge. that we know this. It's not just an attitude. We know this in our core being. That because there's no fear. There is definitely concern about things and, trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the best way that I can accomplish this? What, what is it that I really want? How to balance our lives and what works for us. Okay? And this tool in and of itself really, really pushes us forward. Okay? It really, really gives us the freedom that we need. And it's very useful, very, very useful to have somebody to work with you. It goes a lot faster. It helps to, being a coach, I'm, in somebody's corner. And so I'm, always, encouraging, right? As well as helping you to understand the subtleties of what is really going on with you, and to remind you of the tools and how to use the tools. And this is just one of the tools, okay, that is used. It is the most important one in order to really start breaking free. And to really cope with your inner child. And to, more importantly, get beyond coping. Get your subconscious and even your conscious mind in that space that needs to be in being a processing unit that, yes, input and output. Okay? That's its job. Its job is not to control you. Its job is, it's not, I think, therefore I am. It's I feel, therefore I am. Okay? Because the thinking, well, it's much more biased than the logic that comes from the core being. And again, and I've mentioned this before, you can, look this up in science. Science has also figured out that, the heart, as it were, or at least that center of being, or even as an organ, actually has its own logical faculties. They're still eking out what those are and how they really look. So, but I will tell you, your true logic does come from that space of being. It does not come from your brain. And it is also your sources of power are realized through your heart more than any other place. Okay? It doesn't mean that the other aspects of you are not just as important. They are. Everything is a system. You have, an ecosystem. You have, a cardiovascular system. You have, on a physical level, you have your digestive system, and then these systems interact with the other systems, and or even more systems, but, the neurological system, et cetera. And this is just, on a physical level, but then there are also systems that are happening on a, if you would like to call it, a non-physical level, at least not what we consider to be physical at this point in time in human evolution. Okay. So hopefully this actually was enlightening for those who are listening, or those who are about to listen, because it's just so important to really understand this subconscious until it's put in its proper place is a part of your inner child. Okay? Because it is childish. Okay? And it needs to grow up. And once it grows up, it's no longer actually a part of what is your inner child. Okay? And then we also allow, even though there will always be some, if you would like to call it, childlike aspects of the core being, it also gets a chance to grow up. And growing up is not a bad thing. Growing up, that's why as children we wanted to grow up. We all remember wanting to grow up. Well, okay, I've talked to a couple of people who said, well, I never wanted to grow up. But most of us do want to grow up. That's, sort of a given. And really what that means is to become very empowered and free. And I think that a lot of people say don't want to grow up because they feel like being a grown-up is not free. But again, that's what we're taught, right? And nothing could be more free than being a grown-up, really and truly. Because being a grown-up is, I'm empowered. I have, full responsibility for myself. I can really love myself. I can, it's so much more freeing. I mean, think about it, because as a child, we don't, we're taught we don't know what's going on, I would argue something different, but anyway. But we're taught we don't know what's going on. And we are very much more a product of our environment, because we don't, have the consciousness that we are capable of if we become full adults. Okay? So as a child, physically, we're, told what we can and we cannot do, etc. But we still see that going on as adults. And then other adults who would like to control because of their own self are, giving us laws and rules that really just are about controlling other people. They think that if they can just control enough people, that somehow things will be better. When in all actuality, they're trying to control what is a bunch of children. So that doesn't really work. But that's a different show on, understanding control and expectations and things of that nature. But I don't think that that's going to be an actual show itself. Because my next show I wanted to cover was the idea where a lot of people talk about, being an empath or a highly sensitive person, and aligning with narcissism, and that somehow the narcissist is sensitive, and et cetera. And there's a lot of misnomers when it comes to that. A lot. There's a lot of people really having people feel like victims, which again is the space of being childish instead of being childlike and becoming an adult. Adults are an actual adult is very childlike, believe it or not. And I've always been in tune with that. As a highly sensitive person, there are a lot of variables with us. So I guess it's time for me to actually tell you about what it is or where you can find me, because I have talked about what it is that I do. I am a coach. I coach highly sensitive people. The name of my website is Liberated Sensitive. You can get a hold of me there. And I'm still trying to determine what it is that I really want to put up there. It's a process. I'm allowing the process. I am also in the midst of writing. And you can go to my YouTube, which is also the Liberated Sensitive, where right now, as far as liberated sensitive aspects of it, you can, listen to my podcast. You can message me there. You can use my email, which is theliberatedsensitive@gmail.com, or you can telephone me. I'm offering free 15-minute consultations to see whether or not we together can determine whether or not we would like to work together and get you into a space of being really, 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 really free, and in a space of really, really, really deep, 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 deep love of yourself and all these wonderful things, and, not have to just cope, right, with being insensitive, but do what it is that you really, really want to do in your life. So, again, my phone number is 626-644-2097. Or, wait a minute, that was for the first time. And I offer my sessions via Skype or over the phone. I actually have a couple of people who do it through Facebook Messenger as well. Again, it is theliberatedsensitive.com, and my email is liberatedsensitive@gmail.com. My telephone number is 626-644-2097. And until the week after next, you have a wonderful, wonderful